Mrs. Yarodabersia.
Ave Satanas! Hail Satan! Hail Satan! Hail Satan!
Greetings, heathens. Welcome to Hail Satan. This is the podcast exploring Satanism, culture, and life in general through the eyes of modern Satanists. I'm your host. I'm flying solo here tonight. My name is Joseph Rose. I'm a member of the Satanic Temple, and I'm founder of a little group called Satanic Delco. Today, I'm going to answer a bunch of questions that were sent in from some of you guys, listeners to the show, and also from some non-Satanist outsiders, which is always fun. So because I am by myself tonight, I'm going to try not to, ramble on about too much nonsense. I'm going to cut right to it. So first up, new patrons. I have a slight situation here, guys. I always give new patrons a little shout out at the beginning of the show here, which I love to do. And because of how awesome everyone is, there are like 40 new patrons or something since the last time, many of whom are members of the amazing Satanic Delco group. So I will very quickly read through them. I'll try to keep it to first names. I hope that's okay for everybody, but there are a bunch. So since last time, we've got Gabriel, Pamela, Shelley, Cynthia, Mia, Lori, another Pamela, Greg, Virginia, Amber, Rosemary, Vicky, Justin, Christina, Melissa, Brett, Wouter, Joseph / Joey, Ashley, Christine, Rooney, Anthony, Cade, Alyssa, Kirsten, Melissa, Kate, Roman, David, Sammy, James, Ian, Lexi, Sam, Sarah, Kathy, Alex, and Volt Throwing Wizard. That's a badass name. So that's a lot. And let me just say, I really fucking love and appreciate you guys. Really. Like I said, a lot of those names are members of Satanic Delco. Not everyone, but I appreciate you all so much. It really means a lot to me that you guys are willing to support what we're doing here and you want to be a part of it. And I really love it. And I hope as time goes by, we find more and more ways to get everyone involved in the podcast here. So thank you guys so much. You're the best. Listener mail. We've got a couple of those. Let's see. First up is Keisha. I've never really followed a religion wholeheartedly. Growing up, my family was Southern Baptists and Pentecost. They know I've never followed it, but have never been supportive of how I wanted to be. My ex-husband followed the Norse gods and tried to get me into it, but I never truly did. When the divorce was finalized, I vowed to try and find my own path and my own self-worth. I came across your podcast last week when I heard of the 7 tenets. I realized that was exactly how I am currently trying to live. The more I listen, the more I've learned how to be the true me and come to love who I am after dealing with major mental health issues. Thank you guys for being you and so informative. Thank you, Keisha, for listening, and I'm really glad you're finding something positive in Satanism generally and in our podcast. Next up, hey there, my name is Cade, and I discovered your podcast this month and have already listened to every episode and am currently going through the Patreon ones. I've been a Satanist for around 3 years, and this is the best information about the religion I've found that's not from either LaVey or TST themselves. I am an inactive member of the TST Dallas chapter, and you've inspired me to get back into it. I even started a side project based on Satanism because you inspired me. Having people like you do what you do means the world to so many like myself. Thank you for all that you do and for the community. And Cade, I can't tell you how rad it is for me to get these kind of emails, and it just reinforces that we're doing a good thing here. And I'm so glad that you guys are getting something out of it. So thank you so much. Before I get into our questions, let me just pause for a moment to remind you our website is hailsatanpodcast.com. If you go to the website, you'll find links to all of our social media platforms, which you should link up with us there and interact with us if you can. You can surely drop us an email from the website, which I encourage everyone to do. Tell us your story, give us some feedback or some suggestions on what you'd like us to cover on the show, and I'll try to make it happen. And of course, there's a link to join our great Patreon account, which is the best way to directly support the show and Satanic Delco. If you want to interact with all of us, that is the way to do it. Okay, let's get to our questions. You guys remember Jerry, right? He's been on a couple of episodes here. While he was at work the other day, Jerry went ahead and solicited questions from some of his very non-satanic coworkers. So the first few of these that I have here are from them. Let's get into it. First question: is using Satan, despite it not really being a thing, just for shock value? Ah, yes. So people often say it's shock value or trolling. Trolling has a negative connotation. What people on the other side want to call trolling, it's also known as effectively shining a light on injustice and hypocrisy. And that is more what it's about than trolling. I have a little piece of information here directly from the Satanic Temple. They write, "Some have conveniently concluded, upon observing the Satanic Temple's media coverage, that attention is the primary objective of our activities. While media outreach has helped to raise awareness of the campaigns we've initiated, these campaigns have articulated goals and issues that are important to us and our membership. So inured is the general public to the idea that there is only one monolithic voice of the religious agenda that any attempt to counterbalance or assertion of a minority voice is often viewed as a targeted provocation against those who enjoy traditional religious privilege." Also, let me add, would you ask, is using God, despite it not really being a thing, just for shock value? Because here's the truth, dude. It is. In the case of your Christian God, that's exactly what it is. It was a story so outrageous, presented to some uneducated people in order to shock and scare them into obedience. And it worked so effectively that now, all these years later, whenever something that resembles a challenge to that idea is presented, people hardly even know how to process it. They assume some ulterior motive because, after all, people can't really believe in anything other than our crazy, jealous God that we're used to. And if you want to see that exact theory at work, stop into any first-grade classroom around America and ask the relatively uneducated, inexperienced children in the room if they believe in Santa Claus. And even better, catch one of them being naughty and tell them to stop, or else Santa won't bring them any toys. Watch how fast their little ass snaps right into line. Just mix a bit of lying with a bit of threatening, and sometimes that's all it takes. Because they lack the ability and access to the tools needed to find the truth, they're subject to what they've been told. I went ahead and pulled some clips of Lucien Greaves, who is the co-founder and spokesperson for the Satanic Temple. He did an interview a little while back on a show called Good Morning Britain. Here's a short clip from that interview.
So all this started as initially, was it just a stunt? I mean, Rick Scott, who's a Florida governor, he'd signed a law which basically was saying that, encouraging more inspirational messages to be read in schools, and that the thought was, what that was really about was encouraging teaching of Christianity. Now, initially, what you began was just a stunt in reaction to that. Is that right?
Actually, I was kind of consulting on a stunt, and I was somebody who authentically identified already as a Satanist, and this resonated for me, but it wasn't something I wanted to do publicly because it kind of puts a target on you. So some friends of mine were doing a film project, and they wanted to kind of exploit this idea of an alternative religious voice trying to gain the same access and privileges that were being demanded by Christians. And so Satanism seemed the obvious thing because I had an expertise in that, and then it grew into what it is now.
So, in short, the answer is no. It's not just a thing for shock value. Next question. Is your religion just needling another religion? Why single out Christianity? Is that not petty? All right, interesting. One could say that petty would be an all-knowing, all-powerful being who chooses to create or allow for mass suffering over the course of countless generations where it isn't even required. That would be petty and gross. But luckily for all of us, that's not real. As for what we do as Satanists, where is this perceived focus on Christianity? I hear that from time to time. This is a somewhat popular idea amongst outsiders, like we're just needling Christianity. Very little of what we actually do or focus on as Satanists involves Christianity. We support religious freedom and equality, and that means freedom and equality for Christians as well. The only reason it ever seems like the focus is on Christianity is because of the inappropriate, unhealthy predominance of the theocratic right in the United States of America. The very start of the Satanic Temple was inspired, in part at least, by the George W. Bush administration's faith-based initiatives. I have a little quote here from Lucien Greaves. He says, "My friend in Cambridge," referring to Malcolm Jerry, "was interested in doing a video project inspired by the Bush administration with faith-based initiatives and this idea that you'd get government sponsorships by these religious programs. So the question naturally comes up, what religions qualify? Bush was very much a sweetheart of evangelicals, and religious freedom in their minds typically just means special privileges for them and nobody else. It took us to come in and exploit those open doors that the evangelicals had kicked open and thought that nobody else would walk through. And the funny thing is, they set the precedent, and now they don't know how to stop us." Here's another clip of Lucien from that same interview.
Christian religion teaches good things. It teaches good morals. It teaches a good way of being. So why are you opposing that?
Sometimes it does. And another thing that you don't see in the film is that at the final climactic rally, that was actually an interfaith rally that we put together, and there were Christian ministers speaking before I came on the stage, and they knew they'd be standing with our monument, the Baphomet Monument, and they knew I was the headlining speaker, but they still understood the value in what we were doing. They understood the value of making sure that the government remains neutral insofar as religious viewpoint is concerned, and to that end, they supported what we were doing, even though they might not embrace the symbolic structure we use.
So, make no mistake, the only people that really want to single out Christianity are the Christians. We would strongly prefer that everyone be on a level playing field with equal rights and representation. The struggle is just getting the Christians to agree with such a crazy idea. Next up, why use Satan at all, really? Is Satan a word used to separate yourselves and have others notice you faster? Is that not just bad advertising? Why not just use a chipmunk? Okay, so this is a lot to take in. First, the question says that using Satan gets noticed faster and then calls that bad advertising. Wouldn't that be good advertising? And surely you don't actually think that using a chipmunk would get more attention than using Satan. Here is another clip of Lucien answering essentially this same question.
Using the word Satan, that is a brilliant way of being noticed, is it? I mean, you could call yourself something else, couldn't you? But it's such a provocative word.
Actually, I don't feel we could call ourselves something else. We're non-theistic, so we don't believe in a personal Satan, but it's still deeply meaningful to us, having grown up in Judeo-Christian culture. And this kind of socio-political counter-myth resonates for us in a way that's unique, that we couldn't choose arbitrarily another character. It wouldn't resonate for us as strongly. Some of us came out of superstition ourselves and found it very liberating to be able to embrace the blasphemous, not just to offend other people, but to be liberated from superstition ourselves.
That might be one of the best, most concise answers I've heard Lucien give ever for anything. That sums it up pretty well in a simple way. Next up, are rituals a real component? And if there's no deity, why have them at all? Is it just for a sense of community? Why not bingo or a barbecue? Okay, so rituals are a real but completely optional and unique component of Satanism. As for the deity part, I don't know why anyone should assume a connection between a deity and ritual, especially considering most rituals that people participate in don't involve a deity or anything like that. For the hell of it, I went ahead and looked up some definitions of ritual. We've got a religious or solemn ceremony consisting of a series of actions performed according to a prescribed order. Another, done in accordance with social custom or normal protocol. The last one, a set of fixed actions and sometimes words performed regularly, especially as part of a ceremony. Examples, coffee and the newspaper are part of my morning ritual. The birds were performing a complex mating ritual. Okay? As to the second part about community, yes, a sense of community is one aspect of it for some people some of the time, but many rituals are performed alone by a single person for their own benefit, and that can look like whatever they want, and they're in full control of defining what the ritual is and what purpose it serves for them. And at no time is there a deity or anything supernatural involved or required for any of this. Let's see, the last bit about bingo and barbecues. We all agree, we know that Christians do rituals, right? They have lots of them, all kinds of different rituals, as do most religions, I think. Do some Christian people also play bingo and have barbecues in addition to having all of their ritual? Do Muslims? Do Buddhists? Why is there such a built-in aggression towards Satanists? Why is there any reason to assume that the things we do are somehow less appropriate or less important than the members of any other religion out there? The answer is a combination of fear and genuine ignorance. I can't directly do anything about the fear part. People are going to have to work that out on their own. But I am definitely here to cure some of the ignorance. And once again, here's a little clip of what Lucien had to say about this topic.
Do you have rituals? Religions have rituals, don't you? I'm a Sikh. You go in, you bow down, you cover your head, you take your shoes off.
Right.
You go into a mosque, you do other things. Do you have rituals in your?
Rituals have kind of naturally developed within the Satanic Temple, and it's interesting to see.
So what would I have to do, to come in?
Well, it kind of goes along with our kind of anti-authoritarian philosophy, where most of the rituals enacted by our different chapters and various groups are very much creative performance art pieces and often created just for the moment and for specific events.
Right.
All right. Easy. All right. Let's see. Is there an initiation? If so, what is required, i.e. accepting Jesus or bat mitzvah? No, there really isn't, actually. To identify as a Satanist is obviously free and something you just do on your own. If one feels aligned with the specifics of the Satanism in front of them, that's all that is required to be a Satanist. Now, specific organizations will vary the ways in which you become a member of their organization. In the case of the Satanic Temple, for example, all you need to do is enter your email address and hit the button on their website. You'll get an email back that says basically, welcome, you're a member. And that's that. That's all it really takes. Next question. Why not just be a decent atheist and not deal with the stigma of Satan's perceived pure evil in the eyes of many? This is another case of that weird aggression towards Satanists. Would you ask a Christian, why not just be a Buddhist and not deal with the stigma of being part of a religion that systematically abuses children in horrific, unthinkable ways and then does everything in its power to cover up that and enable more abusers? Because it's the same thing. You're saying, why not just be some religion other than the one you feel is right for you, which is obviously fucking ridiculous. Am I right? The big difference is Satanists aren't actually pure evil. You're thinking of the Catholics. And just in case it wasn't already obvious, atheism and Satanism are not the same thing. You can't just say you're something. I understand there may be a handful of you out there who's confused, thinking, but aren't Satanists atheists? Yes. Modern Satanists are atheists, but not all atheists are Satanists. And I think I've discussed that on the show before, and I'm certain that I will discuss it again, but they are not the same. Now, should we really be concerned with how we're viewed in the eyes of these people? Honestly, I'm not worried about impressing these monsters, and I don't care about any stigma. And when I say these monsters, I'm referring not only to the people that commit those acts that I described firsthand, but also to any person who learns of what we know about those organizations, turns a blind eye, and aren't running for the fucking door to sever any possible connection to such a truly horrific system of corruption and abuse. Every person that walks into those churches or supports what they do feeds the accumulation of wealth, power, and legitimacy that the church uses and abuses. Those people are the moral equivalent of these police officers that stand idle watching as yet another cop kills yet another innocent man. They should be deeply ashamed of themselves, in my opinion. The truth about what Satanists are is available all over the place. This podcast, a popular documentary film, countless websites and books. If someone really wants to know the truth about something, the information is out there. If they choose to remain willfully ignorant, fuck them. I guess. Just fuck them. What are we going to do? So those questions were from... Sorry, did I just sound a little aggressive? I'm sorry. I get a little worked up sometimes. I've not had any weed today. I think those were all questions from the outsiders, whereas the next batch are coming from, I think, listeners to the show or people that follow us on social media or things like that. So Sophia writes in, can you explain the meaning of the Baphomet related to a symbol for Satanists? Okay, so I didn't want to wing this answer too much, so I put together some of my notes and some information directly from the Satanic Temple and maybe some other sources just to sort of summarize the story of the modern Baphomet, particularly the monument that the Satanic Temple had built. So after a statue of the Ten Commandments was donated to Oklahoma City by a state representative and placed outside the Oklahoma State Capitol, the Satanic Temple offered to donate a religious statue of their own. The temple chose Baphomet, traditionally known as a pagan idol associated with the Knights Templar that was conceived back in the 11th century and whose depiction has changed dramatically over time. The best-known representation of Baphomet as a sabbatic goat, as it is known, appeared in 1856 when Eliphas Levi published Dogmas and Rituals of High Magic. The Satanic Temple has continued the tradition of adapting the image of Baphomet. The most notable difference is that Baphomet now has a male chest instead of breasts. This was done for practical reasons, such that state governments could not reject the statue on the grounds that it could be considered obscene. At its core, this modern Baphomet represents the union of opposites and the line of shadow and light. It's openly symbolic of pluralism, diversity, and non-binary identity. Lucien Greaves says, it contains all these binary opposites, above and below, part animal, part human, male and female. It embodies opposites and celebrates contrasts. 2 fingers on the right hand point up and 2 on the left hand point down, meaning as above, so below. These words and the accompanying gesture are familiar to occultists. They are drawn from the ancient works that became popular during the Renaissance and Reformation. The phrase is also used in relation to science, the universe, and God, but Levi wrote that, by making this gesture, his Baphomet expresses the perfect harmony of mercy with justice. Pretty nice. Next question. This one comes from Aaron. I recently joined TST after listening to your podcast. I was wondering how I can get more involved in the Metro Detroit area. I haven't been able to find much information on groups locally. I'm currently trying to take a break from most social media outlets, but I'm suspecting that's my best option. So, Aaron, On the Satanic Temple's website, they have a page for finding your closest local chapter. You just go there, put in your town or zip code, and it should show you if you have a chapter nearby. In the case that you do not have a chapter, your best bet would be to use Google or Facebook to search for any other related groups in your area. And after all of that, if you're still coming up empty, maybe, just maybe, you need to start your own group. I don't know. I could talk for 2 hours on that topic alone, but if you do it, hold on to your ass, Aaron. That's my advice to you. It's going to be a wild ride, no doubt. Next question. It looks like Death is Mandatory and Lazy Daisy both wrote in fairly similar questions, so I put them both on there. For a long time, I've felt torn between both Satanism and Wicca, and I believe I am both. I am the type of Wiccan that believes my magic is essentially a study of and appreciation of the earth and the beauty of all of nature's processes. For my personal practice, it is mainly all about feeding and healing my mind, and I do not let my beliefs overshadow science. I love the Satanic Temple's fight for science, the separation of church and state, and religious liberty, but I also love the freedom of being Wiccan and all the areas of it you can explore and make your own. Does it contradict the values of Satanism for me to be a Wiccan as well? So, based on the definition you just gave, which is, which is a study of and appreciation of the earth and the beauty of all of nature's processes. Based on that, there is absolutely no conflict whatsoever. That sounds pretty grounded and really nice, actually. I did an episode a little while back with Shiva Honey where she discussed rituals and touched on Wicca a bit. You may want to listen to that episode if you haven't heard it yet, but I'd say there's no conflict at all. Do what makes you feel good. Next up, we've got one from Nelson. My wife and I have recently adopted satanic beliefs and follow the 7 tenets. Each day we discuss a tenet and what we think it means and how to live according to it. But the 4th tenet always causes us issues with the freedom to offend and what it means in terms of hate speech, harassment, and things like neo-Nazism. Do you view there are limits to the freedom of the 4th tenet, or how do you reconcile one's freedom to offend with another's freedom not to be harassed or victimized? Is one more important than the other? This is a great question. That 4th tenet is one that comes up most often when people are first introduced to the 7 tenets. I get messages about that one all the time. First, I would say that the 7 tenets are a package deal. They work together as a complete viewpoint rather than something one should pick and choose from. So no matter what you happen to read in any of the tenets, they never exist without a foundation of tenet number 1, which is, of course, one should strive to act with compassion and empathy toward all creatures in accordance with reason. So, if a person is out there being a neo-Nazi or harassing and victimizing people, they're already outside the spirit of the 7 tenets without ever getting to number 4. Probably the most common examples I use to explain that freedom to offend part is that simply by existing as Satanists, we are offensive to many, many people. Trust me, there are people out there who are legitimately terrified, disgusted, and offended by the fact that you or I would ever align ourselves with the unholy S word. And should we be overly concerned about the fact that they're offended? Absolutely not. I couldn't possibly care less that they're offended by my beliefs. The other example I use is using imagery like an inverted cross or of Baphomet. There are people out there that find that genuinely offensive. And to them, I say, respectfully, tough shit. I hope that answers that question. Next up, from Friends of the Satanic Temple, Europe. Would it ever be possible to get rid of church completely? Now, my friends in Europe, as much as I would love to say yes to that one, I cannot realistically imagine a time where church and supernatural religion aren't a thing. no matter how much progress we make or how amazing new scientific developments always are, here in the year 2021, we literally have people who believe the earth is flat. So, no, I am not optimistic that we will be able to get rid of church completely, or the idea of supernatural religion. Next up, we have a question from Haley. What is the most challenging part of being a member of the Satanic Temple? That's an interesting one. Simply being a member of the Satanic Temple isn't challenging at all in my experience. The challenges I've run into all stem from forming and running an active independent group, being outspoken like I am on here and other places, and dealing with conflicts amongst other Satanists. It's kind of sad to say, but honestly, all of the significant drama and trouble I've ever had to deal with, in this world of Satanism, has come from Satanists. At the end of the day, Satanists are people, right? And people are fallible, as we know. People have egos and problems and all kinds of different motivations and bullshit that they drag along into all of this. They will lie. They get jealous. They do all of the wild shit that people will do. At a certain point, I had to wonder, am I doing this wrong? Am I fucking up somehow? But almost everyone I've talked to, including current chapter heads in the Satanic Temple, former chapter heads, including people like Shiva Honey, Lilith Star, Steve Hill, and lots of people running various friends of groups all around the country, I've been reassured time and time again that the kind of stuff I've run into is predictable and commonplace among people in a position similar to my own. The reason I continue doing what I do with Satanic Delco and with this podcast is because of the tremendously positive support and feedback that I get from this community. The overwhelming majority of everyone that I interact with is really great. I know that if I quit because of the shit that a few bad apples give me, that hurts a bunch of people who really seem to value what we're doing and take real life benefit from it. So I'm just going to do the best job I can for as long as I can. And I don't know. That's what I can promise. Yeah, I hope that answers that question. We've got one from Christina and some others. I think they had similar questions here. When did you first hear about Satanism? How long after did it take you until you identified as a Satanist? And how did you explain to your family? So let's see. As a very young kid, through music and movies, I became aware of Satan generally. And at that point, whatever it was, I just thought it was awesome and I was into it. My first memories of the term Satanist or Satanism are probably from some of the talk shows like Geraldo or Phil Donahue. And then I stumbled upon the Satanic Bible randomly in the bookstore one day as a teenager. I saw that black book with the familiar pentagram on it. And again, I just thought, whatever the fuck this is, I need it. This is my shit. Once I got a vibe on the Satanic Bible, that is when I started to identify as a Satanist. But at that time, I was also an angry, depressed teenager, so I probably wasn't exactly the most discerning young Satanist, I would say. A few years rolled by, and when I gave that Satanic Bible a more critical study, it just didn't really hold up for me. So in the middle years there, I just went with atheist and didn't focus so much on the identifying as a Satanist. When the Satanic Temple popped up and I read the 7 Tenets for the first time, that's when I felt like a Satanist again. I was casually aware of the perspective of the romantic Satanists, but it just wasn't something I spent any time thinking about or reading into or anything like that. And as for my family, I don't really have much of that, but what I did ever have probably just assumed I was actually Satan anyway, so it was never really a big deal in my life. And as far as, friends and peer groups and things like that, I don't know. I've mostly just had a take it or leave it, I don't give a fuck type of attitude along the way. So I guess anybody who may have had a significant problem with it didn't really last much longer in my life, and that was always okay with me. Next question comes from Crip Trip. When doing rituals, do I really need candles? I live in a nursing home and candles are not allowed. No, Crip Trip, you do not need candles. You don't need a single damn thing. A ritual, like we said earlier, I think, a ritual can be just about whatever you want it to be, and you can use it for whatever purpose you want to use it for. It's that simple. You make the rules, and fuck anybody who tells you otherwise. Okay? Next up, we've got Mario Advance and Miles. Both wrote in a similar question. What's your favorite satanic film and why? / what are your favorite depictions of the devil in popular culture? This, for me, is the easiest question. This is easy. It's Tim Curry in the film Legend from, when was that? 1985, something like that? Tim Curry in the film Legend is my favorite. Everything about that character is fucking awesome. They just nailed it, and Tim Curry did a great job. For me, there is no close second place behind that one. However, I think coming up pretty soon, I may do an episode on some cool portrayals of Satan in film. If you guys have any suggestions for movies with a cool version of Satan, please, right away, send them my way, and I'll give them a look, especially if it's something I haven't seen before. I'd love to give it a look. Next up, from Lucid Socapex, I don't know. They ask, how do you suggest celebrating Lupercalia if you have kids? It's a raunchy holiday. Well, I guess it's just the same as how you would do any type of adult activities as an adult with children. If it's important enough, you find a way to make it happen. Maybe that means getting a relative or a babysitter to look after the kids. Or maybe it's just a matter of waiting until the kids go to bed and hope for the best. But also, it does not need to be raunchy. Let me see. I grabbed a note here from the Satanic Temple's official Facebook page. They offer some suggestions for celebration. First, a feast that includes a milk-like substance, figs, lamb, or a vegan option, and other foods. Also, rituals with a mock sacrifice, orgies, BDSM, asexual awareness, bodily autonomy, wolves. I love that wolves are just tacked on there at the end casually. Suggestion for celebration, wolves. They do not add any indication of what one might be doing with the wolves. I'm not exactly sure. But if you have access to wolves, by all means, celebrate with them. So there are some non-raunchy bits in there that you could focus on. And maybe you could even find some ways to involve the kids. Perhaps some satanic family yoga or something to focus on bodily autonomy. I don't know. Maybe mock sacrifice the kids? That's probably the answer. Mock sacrifice the kids. Maybe give them a little bath to wash the blood and shit off. Put them to bed and then get crazy with your partner. And it's kind of the best of everything there to celebrate Lupercalia. Make it a family affair. Next up, from Malthus Blackwing, they ask, why do we use pseudonyms? I mean, Malthus Blackwing, why do you use a pseudonym? I've never used one, but I assume that people use them to hide their satanic involvement from people in their lives, to protect their real identity, I guess. I suppose for some, it could just be for fun to have a satanic alter ego or something like that. I've never personally felt a need or desire for one, but if anyone out there enjoys using one, so be it. You should go ahead and use one. And we've got just one last question, I think. Brandon M. writes in, I just recently began reading more about the Satanic Temple and finally watched Hail Satan. I agree with the tenets. All my life, the imagery of satanic stuff, such as the inverted pentacle, has been something I was attracted to. I know that the imagery and beliefs come from the character of Lucifer, even though it's all mythology. But I do have one question that I hope you can answer for me. What exactly does Hail Satan mean? I want to understand before I go saying it to someone. Good question, Brandon. This comes off as a super wholesome question to me, right? This is a wholesome satanic question. So for me, personally, saying Hail Satan is generally a celebration or acknowledgement of the things our Satan represents. That means things like rebellion, critical thinking, bodily autonomy, compassion, all of that stuff. But we get to keep it short and fun and use it in all types of different ways, right? It can be a hello, a goodbye, a contextual hell yeah when appropriate. It can even be used to freak out the squares nearby if there are any. It is simple and effective, and we all sort of understand it in the moment, you know? Pretty simple. Thank you, Brandon. Thank you, everyone, for writing in your questions. And before I leave you, let me remind you, if you've got a moment, direct your web browser to hailsatanpodcast.com and hook up with us on social media and drop us some emails and do all the stuff. Thank you guys once again for tuning in.
Men skydden efter. I bor fri i Sverige.